No one can tell the story of the National Alliance for Insurance Education and Research like its co-founder, Dr. William T. Hold. Let's look back on the last 50 years and see how they have shaped our co-founder and executive chairman and what he's learned.
My parents were immigrants to Canada, my mother from Lebanon and my father from Germany. I never knew really a great deal about my father's background. He was involved in construction, engineering, et cetera, et cetera. But they met in Montreal, and both my brother and I were born there. Of course, we were young, came to the United States. I guess it was like the fourth grade or the fourth grade, I would think. Ended up in Miami Beach. And the reason we ended up in Miami Beach was my father ended up being a chief engineer in a banana boat that one of my mother's cousins actually had an interest in, and they were convinced that the captain was stealing bananas. Now, why they were so concerned about bananas beyond me, but this was a big deal, and they were going to get the goods on the captain. So my father signed on as the chief engineer. According to my father, the captain got suspicious, that they were spying on him, and then he ended up, when they were right off of Miami Biscayne Bay, the captain opened the valves and sank the boat. Coast Guard was out there, and they got there. Nobody died. It was like a bathtub sinking. They opened the drain, and then all the water came up and filled it. So that's how we ended up in Miami. And you and I discussed once, well, how did you get to Miami? Well, my father said, I don't think I want to go back to Canada. It's too cold there. I like it better here. So we got on a Greyhound bus and took the bus all the way from Montreal to Miami. Well, we all worked hard and were relatively poor, not abysmally poor, but the money was very tight. My mother's parents took her out of school in the 8th grade because they said it was too expensive. And then she had an affinity for languages. She actually became a translator, and she really developed a really good translation business. In fact, everybody worked. Everybody had a spirit of independence. My father had his own little construction business. My mother had her own business, so nobody was an employee. So instilled in us early, and to this day, my brother he has his own business. We have essentially our own business. So it was a continual work ethic. They weren't the modern day parents. They weren't particularly supportive of either athletics, or they didn't worry about whether you were passing or failing. You were just supposed to, and you're supposed to keep working. And that's what we did. We worked for my father, on the weekends and holidays, and that was it. My brother didn't work as hard as I did, but he was a little bit he shifted it off. He was a whiner and he complained a lot, but he was very successful. Nobody said you should do this as a career or that as a career, or you should go to college or not go to college. It was all sort of left to us. As long as you didn't, violate the law and get yourself in trouble. Basically, we were sort of left alone. When I graduated from high school, I said, well, I'll just sign up for heavy equipment school, and I'll go learn how to drive a bulldozer and go to Alaska. In fact, in my high school yearbook, people said, good luck in Alaska, dozer Bill, build a dozer and all this stuff. And then I went to work for a couple of months at a factory that refitted aircraft, and everything was a whistle blowing. A whistle would blow, everybody take a break. A whistle would blow, everybody come back from the break. A whistle blow, the days are. I said, these are grown men with families, and their whole life is dominated with a whistle. Is that how I want to grow up? I don't want to grow up like that. People telling me what to do every minute, not to do. So that's when I decided I'm going to go to college. Florida State seemed to be a good university. It was not a huge campus at that time, probably 20,000 people maybe. And that was it, because I had no idea what I wanted to do. So I just took a bunch of general courses, English, history. You had to take some math courses. You had to take statistics. You had to take a little chemistry, just the general things and then you could then choose to go to the College of Business or another college. So after the first year and a half, then you basically made a decision. So I decided to go to the College of Business. So one of my first jobs was with the campus police. I collected traffic fines, which made me an extremely popular person. Students really wanted to pay their traffic fines. So I got started with that, and it wasn't particularly a great job, but it was money. And I needed money at the time. And then from that, ran experience in law enforcement, then I had this opportunity to go into the dry cleaning business. So when I got into the door-to-door dry cleaning business, and being a marketing wizard, I named it Bill's Dry Cleaning. It was amazing. And that grew. And that's how I worked my way through college. My wife worked. I was married at the time. And then I worked on the dry cleaning. One day I was walking down the hall, in the College of Business, and I had taken an insurance class, and the professor came up to me and he said, we've noticed you make good grades. Would you be interested in a scholarship? It was $450. I said, absolutely. There's a lot of money in those days. I said, what do I have to do for that? He said, we need to become an insurance major. I said, you've got your man. I'm in. So that got me more interested in insurance, and they really did help. Through them, I received a fellowship at the University of Wisconsin for a master's degree. And after that, there were other fellowships and grants as I progressed through, the PhD program. But had it not been for the one person, that one professor at Florida State, it would have been a totally different life. It just goes to show you, one person can make a tremendous difference in your life. So, and look what the results that brought about. But they gave me a chance, and I felt, very frank, if people are willing to pay me to go to college, I'm a fool not to go. If they run me off, well, I've been run off, right? And that's my fault. But to turn down, and these are fellowships that are different from scholarships. They paid rent, they paid books, they paid the fees, and the requirement was you couldn't work if you received the fellowships. And I received several of those, very, very fortunate. And I had enough open hours left to have a double major. I would never recommend anybody going to college the way I did. I went 12 months a year, very little time off. And as a consequence, and I had a professor tell me, he said, what's wrong with you? You don't do much of anything else. One asked me one day, said, what if you go across, you get run over? Is this your whole life? Every day studying this? I said, well, I guess that's going to be it if I get run over. Then I went, they helped me get a scholarship, fellowship at Wisconsin. So I went to the PhD program at Wisconsin. And then the gentleman who was the chairman of the insurance program here at Texas and the finance department, he was a graduate of Wisconsin. So he went back and said, do you have a graduate here? We're looking for additional faculty. Is this guy any good? And they were very gracious about complimenting me into work. And he said, this is what he said. Now, he said, I want the absolute best candidate you have here, and he's got to be good. And so they liked me. And I had an offer from University of Texas and University of North Carolina. And when they picked me up here at the airport, he drove up. He had bought a Lincoln from LBJ, the convertibles with the suicide doors, and he had a margarita in his hand. The top was down. The air conditioning was on. He says, welcome to Texas. We're going to go have dinner. I said, what could be bad about this?